The morning I discovered I no longer owned my home was deceptively beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the colonial-style house I'd spent 7 years paying for, illuminating the granite countertops I'd selected with such care. I remember standing there, coffee mug halfway to my lips, staring at the eviction notice like it was written in a foreign language. My name is Emma Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I understood what security meant. I believed that if you worked hard enough, saved diligently, and loved deeply, life would reward you with stability. I was wrong. This has to be some kind of mistake, I whispered to myself, fingers trembling as I reread the document. The paper felt unnaturally heavy in my hands, its legal terminology turning my stomach to ice. Property transfer, new ownership, vacate premises within 30 days. Each phrase struck like a physical blow. I called David immediately. My husband of 8 years didn't answer. That should have been my first clue that something was terribly wrong, but I was still living in a world where I trusted him implicitly. I left a frantic voicemail, my voice cracking as I explained the situation. "David, there's some kind of notice saying we don't own the house anymore. Call me back immediately. This has to be a mistake." The silence that followed was deafening. I called again, and again. The knot in my stomach tightened with each unanswered ring. By midday, desperation drove me to his office at the architectural firm where he'd worked for the past decade. The receptionist's expression shifted subtly when I asked for him, a fleeting look of pity quickly masked by professional courtesy. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. David isn't in today. Would you like to leave a message?" "When will he be back? It's an emergency," I insisted, aware of how wild I must have looked with my uncombed hair and the eviction notice clutched in my white-knuckled grip. Another pause. "I'm afraid I can't say. You might want to try his cell phone." Something in her tone, a careful neutrality that felt rehearsed, sent a chill through me. "I have," I said. "Many times. He's not answering." She looked down at her desk, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell, that's all I can tell you." I left the building in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps David was in an accident. Maybe his phone was dead. But deep down, an insidious suspicion was taking root. I drove to our bank, where David and I had opened joint accounts when we first married. The personal banker's expression when I inquired about our mortgage told me everything before she even spoke. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell, but the mortgage was paid off last month. The property was then transferred to—" She hesitated, checking her computer screen. "To Veronica Winters." Veronica Winters. The name meant nothing to me then. It would soon come to mean everything. "There must be some mistake," I insisted, my voice rising. "I'm co-owner of that house. My name is on the deed. David couldn't have transferred it without my signature." The banker's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. "Actually, Mrs. Mitchell, your name wasn't on the deed. The property was solely in Mr. Mitchell's name." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "That's impossible. We bought it together. I put in half the down payment, $45,000 from my savings. I've been making half the payments for 7 years. She showed me the documentation. There it was in black and white. David Mitchell, sole owner. My contribution had been nothing more than an extended rental payment. Legally speaking, I'd trusted him to handle the paperwork when we bought the house while I was swamped with my nursing job. He'd assured me everything was properly set up as joint ownership. He had lied. For 7 years he had lied. I drove home, or rather, to what I'd thought was my home, in a fog of disbelief. The 2-story colonial with its wrap-around porch and carefully tended flower beds seemed to mock me now. Every bleeding heart and peony I'd planted with my own hands now belonged to someone named Veronica Winters. I sat in the driveway, paralysed with shock, when a sleek black BMW pulled up behind me. A woman emerged, tall, elegant, perhaps in her late 20s. Her dark hair was pulled back in an immaculate chignon, her cream-coloured blazer and tailored pants screaming money and confidence. She approached my car with the measured steps of someone who knew exactly where she stood in the world. "Mrs. Mitchell?" she inquired, leaning slightly to peer through my window. "I'm Veronica Winters. I believe you received my notice." The casual cruelty of the moment was breathtaking. I stepped out of my car on shaking legs, clutching the door for support. "What notice? What is happening?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Where is my husband?" A flicker of something, satisfaction perhaps, crossed her perfectly made-up face. "David is at our apartment in the city. I expected he would have told you by now." "Told me what?" But I already knew. The pieces were falling into terrible place. "About us, about the house." She glanced at the property with the appraising eye of a new owner. "We've been together for nearly 3 years. David and I met at a client event. He's been planning to leave you for quite some time." 3 years. 3 years of lies. 3 years during which I'd worked double shifts at the hospital to help pay for renovations to this house. 3 years during which I'd massaged David's shoulders when he complained about stress, made his favourite meals when he seemed down, supported his career ambitions while putting my own on hold. "This is my home," I said, my voice barely audible. "I paid for half of it." Veronica's smile was cold. "Not according to the legal documentation. David was quite clever about keeping it in his name only. He said you never questioned it." The casual way she delivered this information, as if discussing a particularly shrewd business deal rather than the systematic betrayal of a spouse, made my blood run cold. "You can't do this," I whispered. "I already have." She checked her watch. A Rolex, I noticed dimly. "You have 27 days to vacate the premises. I've been more than generous with the timeline." "Where am I supposed to go?" The question escaped before I could stop it, and I hated how pathetic it sounded. "That's hardly my concern, is it?" Veronica's gaze was unflinching. "David mentioned you have a sister in Chicago. Perhaps she can help." The fact that they had discussed where I might go after being evicted from my own home struck me like a physical blow. David and this woman had sat together, planning the dismantling of my life, considering and dismissing my future as if rearranging furniture. "I want to speak to David," I managed, digging my nails into my palms to keep from screaming. "He'll contact you when he's ready." Veronica glanced at the house again. "I'll be moving in next month after some renovations. I've never cared for the kitchen backsplash you chose." The backsplash I'd spent weeks selecting, the Tuscan-inspired tiles that David had claimed to love. Another lie in a tapestry of deception so vast I couldn't yet see its full pattern. "Get off my property," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Veronica raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "I believe you're confused about whose property this is, Mrs. Mitchell. The deed is quite clear." She handed me a business card, sleek. Minimalist, with her name and interior design consultant beneath it. "My lawyer's contact information is on the back if you have questions, though I suggest you find your own legal representation quickly." As she walked away, her heels clicking on the concrete driveway I'd helped pour 3 summers ago, something inside me hardened. The shock was giving way to a cold, clear anger that felt almost foreign in its intensity. I entered the house, no longer my house, and looked around with new eyes. The furniture we'd chosen together, the photographs on the walls, the books on the shelves. What of this was truly mine? What could I claim in this life that had suddenly revealed itself to be built on sand? I moved through the rooms in a daze, touching surfaces, memorizing details I'd taken for granted. In our bedroom, no, David's bedroom, I opened his closet to find it half empty. He'd been moving his things out gradually. I realised. Right under my nose. The remaining clothes smelled of his cologne, a scent I'd once found comforting, but now made my stomach turn. On his nightstand sat a framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Maui. My sun-kissed face beamed at the camera, while David looked slightly past it, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Had it always been like that? Had I simply failed to see? My phone rang, startling me from my reverie. David's name flashed on the screen. My hand shook as I answered. Emma. His voice, once so beloved, now sounded like that of a stranger. "I see you've met Veronica." How could you? The question encompassed so much. The affair, the house, the lies, that it felt inadequate, absurdly small against the magnitude of his betrayal. "I've been trying to find the right time to tell you," he said, as if discussing a dinner reservation he'd forgotten to mention. Things with Veronica. They happened organically. I never meant to hurt you. Never meant to... I choked on the words. You stole our house, David. You put it in your name only and then transferred it to her. A pause. Financially, it made the most sense. You'll get a fair settlement in the divorce. Fair? I was nearly screaming now. I put $45,000 of my savings into this house. I've paid half the mortgage for 7 years. I painted every room, planted every garden bed, chose every fixture. And you'll be compensated, he said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. Veronica's father is a judge. He's advised me on the most equitable way to handle this. The most equitable way, as if equity had anything to do with what was happening. Where am I supposed to go? I asked again, hating that it was the only question my shocked mind could formulate. You could stay with your sister until you find a place, he suggested, echoing Veronica's words so precisely that I knew they'd rehearsed this conversation. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the settlement. David, I said, my voice breaking, this is our home. We built this life together. A long silence followed. When he spoke again, his voice had hardened. The house is in my name, Emma. I paid for most of it. Your nursing salary barely covered the property taxes. This lie, this blatant, easily disprovable lie, finally broke through my shock. I make $87,000 a year as a charge nurse, David. I have copies of every check I've written for this house. I have bank statements. I have proof. Proof of what? That you contributed to household expenses while living here. That's not the same as ownership. His tone had taken on the patronising quality he used with junior architects at his firm. Look, I'm sorry it's happening this way, but Veronica and I are starting a life together, and this house is part of that. Does her father know you're still married? I asked suddenly. Does he know you're transferring marital assets before the divorce is even filed? Another pause, longer this time. I'm hanging up now, Emma. My lawyer will be in touch. The line went dead. I stood in the bedroom that was no longer mine, clutching a phone that connected me to nothing, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The Emma who had entered this house earlier today, trusting, secure in her place in the world, was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone whose faith in people had been shattered beyond repair. I looked around at the life I was being forced to abandon and made a decision. I would not go quietly. I would not disappear to my sister's spare bedroom in Chicago, while David and Veronica enjoyed the fruits of my labour. This house, this life, had been built with my sweat, my money, my love, and I would fight for what was mine. I called in sick to the hospital for the next 3 days. Then I began gathering evidence, bank statements showing my contributions to the down payment, cancelled cheques for mortgage payments, credit card statements documenting furniture purchases and renovation expenses, emails between David and me discussing house decisions as equal partners. I compiled everything into neat chronological folders. Next, I photographed every room in the house, documenting all our possessions. I created an inventory spreadsheet with estimated values and dates of purchase. I noted which items had been gifts from my family, which had been bought with my money alone, which had been joint purchases. As I worked, memories assaulted me from every corner. The sectional sofa we'd spent months saving for, the antique writing desk my grandmother had left me, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, discussing our days, making plans for a future that no longer existed. By the second day, anger had replaced shock as my primary emotion. I contacted 3 divorce attorneys, ultimately selecting Meredith Zhao, a sharp-eyed woman whose office walls were lined with credentials and whose handshake conveyed absolute confidence. Let me be clear, Mrs. Mitchell, she said after reviewing my documents. What your husband is attempting is called dissipation of marital assets, and it's illegal. Transferring the house to his girlfriend before divorce proceedings is a textbook example of financial infidelity. But my name isn't on the deed, I reminded her. That doesn't matter as much as you might think, she replied, making notes in an elegant script. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state. Even if the house is in his name only, it was purchased during the marriage and maintained with marital funds. You've provided excellent documentation of your contributions. Hope flickered faintly. So I can get my house back? Meredith's expression turned cautious. Property division in divorce is complex. The court will look at many factors: length of marriage, contributions of each spouse, future earning potential. Our immediate concern is preventing further asset transfers and securing your short-term living situation. She quoted her retainer fee, $7,500, and I flinched. It was nearly all I had in my personal savings account after years of pouring money into the house, but what choice did I have? Ms. Winters mentioned that her father is a judge, I said, writing the cheque with a shaking hand. Will that be a problem? Meredith's smile was thin. Judge Winters presides over criminal court in Hartford County. Divorce proceedings are handled by family court, different judges entirely. His influence there would be limited, if not inappropriate. As I left her office, clutching a folder of preliminary paperwork, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Moving company coming tomorrow for my things. Please be out of the house from 10:02. The casual presumption that I would accommodate his schedule, that I would simply step aside while he dismantled our life together, ignited something primal in me. I texted back, I'll be at work. Take only what's yours. I have inventoried everything. His response came quickly. Don't make this difficult, Emma. Difficult, as if I were a traffic delay on his smooth journey to a new life. As if my pain were an inconvenience rather than the natural consequence of his actions. That night, alone in what had been our bed, I wept for the first time since receiving the eviction notice. Not delicate, cinematic tears, but ugly, racking sobs that left me gasping for breath, my pillow soaked, my throat raw. I cried for the years wasted loving someone who could discard me so easily. I cried for the future I'd planned that would never come to pass. I cried for the children we'd talked about having someday, children who would now never exist. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollowed out but strangely clearer. The path forward was difficult but necessary. I would fight for what was rightfully mine, and I would rebuild whatever remained afterward. The next morning, I left for work early, unable to bear witnessing the dismantling of my home. My shift at Hartford Memorial was a blessing, the medical emergencies of others requiring such complete focus that my own crisis receded temporarily to the background. In the break room, I confided in my friend and fellow nurse Tara, who responded with appropriate outrage. He did what? She exclaimed, her coffee forgotten. Emma, that's insane and illegal. Please tell me you've called a lawyer. I nodded, picking at the sandwich I had no appetite for. Yesterday. She seems confident, but David's girlfriend's father is apparently some big-shot judge. Tara's eyes narrowed. Wait, Veronica Winters, as in Judge Raymond Winters' daughter. I looked up sharply. You know her? Not personally, but everyone in Hartford knows the Winters family. Old money. Major political connections. Tara leaned closer. Raymond Winters has a reputation for being ruthless on the bench, and his wife, Elaine, Veronica's mother, is on the board of this hospital. My stomach dropped. So they could make trouble for me here? Tara hesitated. I don't want to scare you. But the Winters family doesn't play fair. They've got fingers in every pie in this city. Great, I muttered. So I'm up against not just David and his girlfriend, but an entire dynasty. Hey! Tara gripped my hand across the table. You've got friends, you've got evidence, and you've got the moral high ground. For whatever that's worth. Not much, apparently, I said bitterly. Stay with me, she offered impulsively, until you figure things out. My spare room isn't much, but it's yours as long as you need it. The generosity of this offer, from someone who wasn't family, who had no obligation to help me, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Tara, I can't impose like that. It's not imposing if I'm offering, she insisted. Besides, my cat Lincoln loves you more than me anyway. That evening, I returned to the house dreading what I might find. The moving company had come and gone, leaving behind a home that felt partially amputated. David's desk was missing from the study. The expensive leather recliner he'd insisted on buying last year was gone from the living room. Empty spaces on the walls marked where his favourite art pieces had hung. But what struck me hardest was what remained. My books still lined the shelves. My grandmother's quilt still draped across the foot of the bed. My coffee mug, the oversized ceramic one with "Nurses Save Lives" printed on it, still sat in the dish drainer where I'd left it that morning. These mundane possessions, soon to be packed away or discarded at Veronica's whim, represented a life I'd built with care and love. A life I was now being forced to abandon. My phone rang again. David. I answered without speaking. "I got some of my things today," he said, his tone maddeningly casual. "I'll need to come back for the rest." "Did you take the blue recliner?" I asked, my voice flat. "Yes, why?" "I paid for that. With my bonus last December, won $200 from Rooms to Go." A pause. "Emma, don't be petty, it's just furniture." "It's not petty to want what's mine, David, just like it's not petty to want the house I helped pay for." He sighed, the sound crackling through the connection. "My lawyer says you're making threats. Something about dissipation of assets." "Just stating facts," I replied. "You transferred our house to your girlfriend before divorce proceedings. That's illegal." "The house was in my name," he said, an edge entering his voice. "I bought it with my income." "We both know that's a lie." My voice remained steady, controlled. "I have bank statements showing my $45,000 contribution to the down payment. I have records of every mortgage payment I've made for 7 years. Those were household contributions, not ownership stakes," he countered. "Any judge will see that." "We'll find out, won't we?" I said. "By the way, how's Veronica's mother? Still on the hospital board?" His sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just making conversation about my future mother-in-law, or would have been, I guess." "Don't do this, Emma," he warned. "You can't win against the Winters family. Take the settlement I'm offering and move on." "What settlement? You haven't offered anything except an eviction notice." Another sigh. "My lawyer will send over the paperwork tomorrow. It's generous, $25,000 cash. Enough for a new start somewhere." I almost laughed. $25,000 for my half of a house worth $675,000, for 8 years of my life, for the betrayal and humiliation? That's your idea of generous? "The house isn't worth that much," he backpedaled quickly. "The market's down, and I paid the majority of—" "Save it for court, David," I interrupted. "I'm done with your lies." I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding, but my resolve strengthened. David had always underestimated me, my intelligence, my determination, my worth. It was time he learned his mistake. The next day brought the promised settlement offer from David's lawyer, $25,000 in exchange for relinquishing all claims to the house and other marital assets, plus signing a non-disclosure agreement about our marriage and its dissolution. I forwarded it to Meredith without comment. Her response came within the hour. "This is insultingly low. Do not sign anything. We're filing an emergency motion to prevent further asset dissipation." Two can play at documentation, I thought grimly, setting up a dedicated email folder for all communications with David and his lawyer. Every text, every voicemail, every email was carefully preserved and backed up. If this went to court, and increasingly it seemed it would, I wanted an unassailable record. That evening, as I packed essential belongings to take to Tara's apartment, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find an older woman standing on my porch. Elegantly dressed in a navy suit, her silver hair swept into an immaculate updo. Pearls gleaming at her throat. I knew instantly who she was, even before she spoke. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her voice cultured, measured. "I'm Elaine Winters, Veronica's mother. May I come in?" The audacity was breathtaking, but curiosity overcame indignation, and I stepped aside. Elaine Winters entered my home with the confidence of someone who already considered it hers by extension. Her assessing gaze swept the entryway, the living room, cataloguing and evaluating everything it touched. "Lovely home," she commented, removing her gloves with deliberate movements. "Though Veronica has plans to update it considerably." "I'm sure she does," I replied, not bothering to hide my bitterness. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Winters?" She turned to face me fully, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and firmness. I understand you're reluctant to accept the settlement David has offered. Reluctant? I repeated. I find it insulting. $25,000 is a substantial sum for someone in your position, she said, the condescension in her tone making my skin crawl. Enough to secure a nice apartment, perhaps even a down payment on a small condo. My position, I echoed. And what position is that exactly? A nurse with limited assets outside this marriage, she replied smoothly. We've done our homework. Mrs. Mitchell, your parents are deceased. Your sister is a kindergarten teacher in Chicago with 2 children and a mortgage of her own. Your resources are limited. The cold calculation behind this assessment, the way they had mapped my support network and found it wanting, sent a chill through me. Why are you here, Mrs. Winters? I asked directly. To threaten me? A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed her perfectly composed face. To offer perspective. My daughter and David have a future together, a bright one. He's been promised a partnership at the firm, largely due to connections my husband and I have facilitated. How nice for them, I said flatly. It could be nice for you too, she continued, ignoring my tone. Accept the settlement, sign the papers, move on with dignity. The alternative... She let the sentence hang. The alternative being what? I challenged. That I fight for my legal right to marital assets, that I expose how your daughter and my husband conspired to transfer property illegally, that I make public how the esteemed Winters family sanctions adultery and fraud. Her expression hardened. Be very careful, Mrs. Mitchell. My husband may preside over criminal court, but his influence extends throughout the Connecticut judicial system. My position on the hospital board gives me certain insights into personnel matters. Nursing jobs are competitive these days, aren't they? The threat was unmistakable. Fight us and lose everything, not just your home, but your career. I should have been intimidated. I should have backed down. But something had broken in me when I received that eviction notice. Something that had once made me accommodating, conciliatory, willing to smooth over conflicts for the sake of peace. In its place was a steel core I hadn't known I possessed. Let me be equally clear, Mrs. Winters, I said, stepping closer to her. I have documented every penny I've contributed to this house. I have evidence of your daughter's relationship with my husband dating back 3 years. I have witnesses who can testify to my investment in this property, and I have nothing left to lose. Her eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Everyone has something to lose, Mrs. Mitchell. Not me. Not anymore. I moved toward the door, opening it wide. Now I think it's time for you to leave the house that I am still legally entitled to occupy for the next 25 days. She gathered her gloves and purse with unhurried movements. Think carefully about your next steps. $25,000 is our final offer. Tell David and Veronica they'll be hearing from my lawyer, I replied. And, Mrs. Winters, if I experience any sudden performance issues at the hospital, I'll know exactly who to thank, publicly. After she left, I leaned against the closed door, my heart hammering. I had just threatened one of the most powerful women in Hartford, but instead of fear, I felt an unfamiliar sense of exhilaration. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was fighting back. That night, I moved the first load of my belongings to Tara's apartment, clothes, toiletries, important documents, irreplaceable mementos. Her spare room was indeed small, barely fitting a twin bed and dresser, but the welcome was genuine. Lincoln, her enormous orange tabby, immediately claimed my lap when I sat on the couch, purring thunderously. He knows who needs comfort, Tara said, handing me a glass of wine. So, what's the plan? I sipped the wine, grateful for its warmth spreading through my chest. Fight. Document everything. Make it as difficult and public as possible for them to steal my house. The nuclear option, she observed. I like it. They've left me no choice, I said. David transferred our house to his girlfriend. His girlfriend's mother threatened my job. What else can I do but fight? Tara raised her glass in a toast. To righteous fury and well-deserved revenge. I clinked my glass against hers, but my smile faded quickly. I'm scared, Tara. The Winters family has money. Connections. All I have is the truth. Sometimes, she said softly, that's enough. The next morning, I received an email from Meredith. Our emergency motion had been granted. David was prohibited from transferring any further marital assets pending divorce proceedings. Additionally, the judge had ordered the house transfer to Veronica frozen until ownership could be properly determined. It was a small victory, but significant. David called almost immediately, his voice tight with controlled anger. What have you done, Emma? Judge Lombardi just froze all my accounts. Not all your accounts, I corrected him. Just the joint ones, and any that might contain marital assets. Standard procedure in divorce cases involving asset dissipation. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're being vindictive. No, David, I'm being smart. There's a difference. Veronica's father is furious, he continued, a note of panic entering his voice. Do you understand what you're doing? Who you're going up against? Perfectly, I replied. The question is, do you understand what you've done? Who you betrayed, what you tried to steal from me? A long silence followed. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer, more calculating. Emma, we can work this out. The $25,000 was just an opening offer. We can negotiate. We will, through our lawyers, I said firmly. And David, don't send your girlfriend's mother to threaten me again. It won't work. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations, document gathering, and emotional upheaval. I continued working at the hospital, half expecting to be called into administration at any moment based on some manufactured complaint. But nothing happened. Perhaps Mrs. Winters was more cautious than I'd given her credit for. Or perhaps she was waiting for a more opportune moment to strike. I visited the house daily, continuing to pack my belongings methodically, room by room. With each box, each emptied drawer, the reality of my situation became clearer. Even if I won in court, even if I received my fair share of the house's value, I would never live there again. Too many memories now tainted by betrayal, too much pain embedded in its walls. 20 days after receiving the eviction notice, I was in the attic, sorting through Christmas decorations and old photo albums, when I heard someone enter the house below. Footsteps too heavy to be Veronica's, too confident to be a stranger's. David appeared at the top of the attic stairs, looking simultaneously familiar and foreign. The man I'd loved for 8 years, now a stranger wearing my husband's face. What are you doing here? I asked, not bothering to hide my hostility. I still own this house, he replied, at least until the court says otherwise. I returned to the box I'd been packing, placing our wedding album inside without looking at it. What do you want, David? He moved closer, his footsteps cautious on the attic floorboards. To talk. Without lawyers. Without threats. About what? About ending this before it gets uglier. He gestured to the boxes surrounding us. About finding a solution we can both live with. I straightened, facing him fully. A solution where you and Veronica get the house I helped pay for, where I get a fraction of what I'm owed. That kind of solution. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. The house was in my name, Emma. Legally, it doesn't matter, I interrupted. It was purchased during our marriage with marital funds. My name should have been on the deed, and you know it. You deliberately kept it off. That's not true, he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine, a tell I'd learned early in our relationship. David couldn't lie while maintaining eye contact. It is true, I said quietly, and we both know it. The question is whether a judge will see it that way. He paced the small, clear area of the attic, agitation evident in every movement. This isn't just about the house anymore. The Winters family. They're not people you want as enemies. Apparently neither am I replied. Tell me something, David. Was it worth it? Destroying our marriage, betraying my trust, allying yourself with people who think threatening someone's livelihood is an acceptable negotiation tactic. Was it worth it for Veronica? He stopped pacing, his expression unreadable. She understands me. My ambitions, my potential. And I didn't. The question emerged more vulnerable than I'd intended. You were content with this? He gestured around us, at the modest house we'd called home. This life, this neighbourhood. I want more. The naked ambition in his voice, the implication that our life together had been somehow insufficient, a stepping stone to something better, struck me like a physical blow. You could have divorced me honestly, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. You could have said you weren't happy, that you wanted different things. Instead, you lied. You cheated. You stole. I didn't steal. You transferred our house to your girlfriend. I exploded. Years of suppressed rage finally breaking through. You lied about the deed. You took my money, my time, my love, and gave me nothing in return. What would you call it? He stepped back, startled by my vehemence. For 8 years, I had been the peacemaker in our relationship, the one who compromised, who smoothed things over. My anger was unfamiliar territory for both of us. I came here to offer a compromise, he said stiffly, $100,000, no court battles, no public embarrassment for either of us. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. $100,000 for half of a $675,000 house? For 8 years of marriage? For the career advancements I sacrificed to support yours? Your nursing career wasn't exactly on a partnership track, he scoffed, and the house isn't worth nearly that much with the current market downturn. The last comparable on this street sold for $695,000 3 months ago, I countered. I checked. His expression darkened. Fine, $150,000, but that's absolutely final, and you sign an NDA about Veronica. I studied him. This man I'd once thought I knew better than anyone. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just about money. It's about justice. It's about not letting you and the Winters family steamroll me because you think I'm too weak to fight back. Emma. No, I cut him off. My lawyer has already filed for an equitable division of assets, including the house. She's also added claims of fraud and emotional distress based on how you handled the property transfer. We're requesting a forensic accounting of all your finances for the past 5 years. His face paled. You can't do that. I already have, I replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have packing to finish. He stood there, seemingly at a loss for words before turning to leave. At the top of the stairs, he paused. You won't win this, Emma. The Winters family doesn't lose. First time for everything, I replied, returning to my boxes. After he left, I sat heavily on an old trunk, my bravado evaporating. The truth was, I had no idea if I could win against the combined forces of David and the Winters family. Their resources dwarfed mine. Their connections extended to places I couldn't reach. But what choice did I have except to fight? I continued packing, coming across a small wooden box I'd almost forgotten. Inside were letters David had written me during our first year together. Earnest, loving notes about our future, our dreams, the life we would build. I read each one, tears blurring the familiar handwriting, before placing them in the box marked discard. That past was gone. Whatever future emerged from this wreckage would be built on different foundations. The final days before the eviction deadline passed in a flurry of activity. I hired movers for the furniture I was taking to storage, my grandmother's writing desk, my bookshelves, the dining table I'd inherited from my parents. The rest would remain in the house until the court decided its fate. On my last night in the house, I walked through each room saying goodbye to the space that had been my home for 7 years. In the kitchen, I ran my hands over the countertops I'd selected with such care. In the living room, I remembered countless evenings curled up with David, planning a future that would never come. In the backyard, I stood among the perennial beds I'd lovingly tended, now blooming for someone else's enjoyment. It wasn't just a house I was losing. It was a vision of life I'd believed in completely. A future I'd thought was secure. The next morning, I handed my keys to the property management company David had hired to oversee the transition. The agent, a young woman who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation, avoided my eyes as she had me sign the final paperwork. "Is there a forwarding address for your mail?" she asked. My lawyer will handle it, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She hesitated, then said quietly, For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all this. It doesn't seem right. A small kindness from a stranger, but it nearly undid me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked to my car for the last time. Tara's apartment became my temporary home while the legal battle unfolded. Lincoln the cat appointed himself my personal comfort animal, sleeping beside me each night as if sensing my need for warmth and connection. Tara's unwavering support, from late-night wine sessions to accompanying me to meetings with Meredith, kept me anchored when despair threatened to overwhelm me. The legal process moved with excruciating slowness. David's lawyer, an expensive partner from one of Hartford's most prestigious firms, filed motion after motion to delay, to challenge, to obstruct. Each required a response from Meredith, each depleted my dwindling resources. 3 months after moving out of my home, I received a call from Meredith. We've had a breakthrough, she said, her voice cautiously optimistic. The judge has ordered a full accounting of all property transfers, including the house. David's lawyer tried to fight it, but Judge Martinez wasn't having it. What does that mean? I asked, hardly daring to hope. It means they have to provide documentation for everything. When the house was purchased, who contributed what, when, and how the transfer to Veronica took place. Given what you've shown me, I suspect they won't be able to justify their actions legally. A small victory, but significant. That evening, I treated Tara to dinner at our favourite Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, but a celebration nonetheless. To Judge Martinez, Tara toasted, raising her glass of house red. May she continue to see through David's bullshit. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling for what felt like the first time in months. And to friends who provide shelter in the storm. Tara's expression grew serious. How are you really doing? Emma? Not the brave face you show at work or with your lawyer. The real you. I considered the question carefully. Angry, hurt, but also stronger somehow. Like I've been tested and found I'm not as breakable as I thought. You're not breakable at all, she said firmly. You're the toughest person I know. I don't feel tough, I admitted. Most days I feel like I'm barely hanging on. That's what tough looks like, she replied. Not fearlessness, persistence despite fear. The next day brought another development, an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognise. When I answered, a woman's voice, tentative and unfamiliar, asked for me by name. This is Emma Mitchell, I confirmed. Who's calling? My name is Jennifer Winters, she said. I'm Veronica's sister-in-law, married to her brother Michael. I think we should talk. My heart raced. About what? About Veronica, about the house, about things you should know. She paused, then added hurriedly, Not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere? Somewhere public but private? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in West Hartford, far from the hospital and from David's office. I arrived early, nervous and suspicious, half expecting to find David or Elaine Winters waiting instead. But the woman who approached my table matched the description Jennifer had given, mid-30s, shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a green cardigan. She carried herself with the polished confidence I'd come to associate with the Winters family, but her expression was troubled, uncertain. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I've been debating whether to do this for weeks. Do what exactly? I asked, my guard still firmly up. Jennifer glanced around the cafe, then leaned forward. I know what Veronica and your husband did, with the house. It's not the first time she's done something like this. My breath caught. What do you mean? Veronica has a pattern, she said, her voice low. She targets men in positions that can benefit her, professionally, financially, socially. Your husband's firm has connections to major developers that her interior design business needs. Before him, it was a portfolio manager at Goldman Sachs. Before that, a surgeon. Were they all married? I asked, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. Jennifer nodded. Most of them. It's part of the thrill for her, I think, taking something that belongs to someone else. And the properties. Has she done that before too? Twice that I know of, she confirmed. An apartment in Boston and a lake house in the Berkshires, both transferred to her before divorces were finalised, both legally questionable. My mind raced with implications. Why are you telling me this? Why risk angering your family? Jennifer's expression hardened. Because I'm tired of watching them destroy people. Because what they did to you is wrong, and because... She hesitated. Because they're doing the same thing to me. What do you mean? Michael and I are divorcing, she said, her voice catching slightly. 20 years of marriage, 2 children, and suddenly I'm being pressured to accept a settlement that's a fraction of what I'm entitled to. The Winters family playbook in action. Understanding dawned. You're hoping my case sets a precedent. She nodded. If you can stand up to them successfully, maybe I can too. I don't know if I can win, I admitted. They have so many resources, so many connections. They also have secrets, Jennifer replied. Vulnerabilities. Raymond, my father-in-law, has made some questionable investments recently. Nothing illegal, but ethically dubious. The kind of things a judge wouldn't want publicised. Are you suggesting I blackmail them? I asked, shocked. I'm suggesting you use every advantage available to you, she corrected. Just as they would. Just as they do. She opened her purse and removed a flash drive, sliding it across the table. Emails between Veronica and David going back 3 years, bank records showing the property transfer, documents my husband doesn't know I have access to. I stared at the small device, hardly believing what was happening. This could be evidence in my case. It could be, she agreed. Use it however you need to. All I ask is that you keep my name out of it. Say you received it anonymously. Why would you risk this? I asked, still suspicious. If they found out. They've already taken everything that matters, she said simply. My marriage, my security, my place in the family. What else can they do to me? The resignation in her voice, the echo of my own thoughts after receiving the eviction notice, struck a chord of recognition. Here was another woman being discarded by the Winters family machine, another life being casually dismantled for their convenience. Thank you, I said, pocketing the flash drive. I'll have my lawyer review everything carefully. Jennifer stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Elaine, my mother-in-law, she's serious about her threats. If she said she'd target your job, she meant it. Be careful. The warning lingered in my mind as I returned to Tara's apartment. I immediately backed up the flash drive's contents to multiple secure locations before calling Meredith. I've received some documents anonymously, I told her, choosing my words carefully. Information about David and Veronica's relationship, the property transfer, possibly other cases like mine. Bring everything to my office tomorrow, she instructed. Don't discuss it with anyone else, and Emma, this could be the break we've been waiting for. That night I could barely sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. If Jennifer's information was legitimate, if there was a pattern of behaviour, documented evidence of planning and deception, it changed everything. Not just for my case, but potentially for others who had been victimised by Veronica Winters and her family. The next morning, I delivered the flash drive to Meredith, who promised to review its contents with her team and determine what could be legally used in our case. 2 days later, she called me into her office. Her expression more animated than I'd seen it yet. This is gold, she said without preamble. Emails between David and Veronica discussing how to transfer the house without your knowledge, bank records showing the transaction, and yes, evidence of similar situations with other men and other properties. Hope flared. So we can use it? Some of it, yes. The emails and bank records directly related to your case are admissible. The pattern of behaviour with others is trickier. We'd need those victims to come forward as witnesses, which they might not be willing to do. What's our next step? I asked. Meredith's smile was predatory. We request a settlement conference. We show them what we have, and we make it clear that if this goes to trial, everything becomes public record, including Veronica's history of similar arrangements. The settlement conference was scheduled for the following week at Meredith's office. David arrived with his lawyer, a sleek, expensive-looking man in his 50s. Veronica and her parents were conspicuously absent. David looked tired, I noticed, with a mixture of satisfaction and lingering concern. Dark circles under his eyes, his normally impeccable clothing slightly rumpled. The strain of the past months had affected him too, it seemed. His lawyer began with the same offer they'd made previously, $150,000 in exchange for dropping all claims to the house and signing an NDA. Meredith listened politely, then opened her laptop. "Before we respond to your offer, I'd like to share some information that has recently come to our attention," she said smoothly. Emails between Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Winters, dating back 3 years, discussing their relationship and, more significantly, their plans regarding the marital home. She turned the screen so David and his lawyer could see. David's face drained of colour as he recognised his own words on the screen. "V, once the deed is solely in my name, we can transfer it to you before filing anything with Emma. Clean break, no complications. She'll never know until it's done. D." Meredith scrolled to another email. "David, Daddy says timing is crucial. Transfer to me first, then wait at least 60 days before filing for divorce. Makes it harder to prove dissipation of assets. V." And another. "V, Emma's bonus check cleared today. Another $12,000 toward the mortgage she thinks she co-owns. Almost feel bad for her. Almost. D." With each email, David seemed to shrink further into his chair. His lawyer's expression remained carefully neutral, but I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, reassessing the case, the evidence, the potential outcomes. "We also have bank records," Meredith continued relentlessly, "showing Mrs. Mitchell's substantial contributions to the home, both the down payment and ongoing mortgage payments. And documentation of similar property transfers involving Ms. Winters in the past." The lawyer held up his hand. "I think we need a moment to confer privately." "Of course," Meredith agreed graciously. "Take all the time you need." They left the conference room, David avoiding my gaze entirely. When the door closed behind them, I released a shaky breath. "They're rattled," Meredith observed quietly. "Badly." "Will it be enough?" I asked. "I think so. That last bit about other property transfers, that's what really got their attention. The Winters family won't want that becoming public record." 20 minutes later, David and his lawyer returned. The lawyer spoke first, his tone conciliatory. "We're prepared to make a new offer. $300,000 cash, plus return of all furniture and personal items Mrs. Mitchell claims. In exchange, she relinquishes all claims to the house and signs a mutual non-disparagement agreement, not a full NDA." Meredith looked at me questioningly. The amount was substantial, more than I'd expected to receive, though still less than a truly equitable division would provide. But the non-disparagement agreement, rather than a full NDA, meant I wouldn't be silenced completely. I nodded slightly. "I can accept those terms with one addition. A formal apology. In writing, acknowledging the deception regarding the deed and property transfer." David started to object, but his lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm. "We can agree to that," the lawyer said. 2 weeks later, I received the settlement check and David's written apology. A terse, legalistic document that nonetheless acknowledged his deception regarding the house deed and expressed regret for actions that caused harm. It wasn't the heartfelt contrition part of me still longed for, but it was validation, official recognition that I had been wronged. With the settlement money, I put a down payment on a small townhouse in West Hartford, nothing grand, but mine entirely, with my name alone on the deed. I furnished it with pieces from my past life that still brought joy rather than pain, supplemented with new items that represented fresh beginnings. Tara helped me move in, bringing Lincoln for a farewell visit before I officially struck out on my own again. As we shared take-out Chinese food on my new living room floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, she raised her water glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said. "And to the strongest woman I know." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a tentative peace settling over me. "And to hard lessons well learned." Later, after Tara left, I stood in the centre of my new home, smaller than the house I'd shared with David, but untainted by betrayal. Every payment would be mine alone. Every decision would be mine alone. Every triumph and struggle would be mine alone. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I doubted it ever would. But alongside it had grown something unexpected. A fierce pride in my own resilience, a newfound trust in my ability to rebuild from ashes. I had lost a house, a husband, a future I'd planned meticulously. But I had found something perhaps more valuable, the knowledge that I could withstand devastation and emerge stronger, that I could fight for justice, and sometimes, against all odds, win. As I unpacked boxes in my new bedroom, I came across a framed quote I'd bought years ago but never displayed, words from Maya Angelou that seemed newly relevant. "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated." I hung it on the wall where I would see it every morning, a reminder of how far I'd come and of the strength I hadn't known I possessed until it was tested beyond endurance. The house David and I had shared was behind me now. The rental where I'd temporarily taken shelter was behind me too. This place, modest but mine, hard-won and honest, was not just a house but a testament to survival, to justice, to beginning again. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left